All right, we're rolling. So first things first, Michelle, how are you?
I'm good.
That's very good to hear. Now, you've very recently released your first book. As a songwriter and now an author, what have you learned about your craft in a way, and in particular in terms of songwriting?
That's a great question. I think that it just deepened my understanding of how to observe the world and what makes it special. I mean, you have to be so concise in songwriting, and you have to do that a lot more and tap into different elements of things in writing a book. I'm wondering, I haven't written any music since writing the book, since finishing the book. Um, but there are certain things that I've learned from my editor, even something so simple like, one thing that was a really wonderful edit from my editor was that, I wish that you wrote more about the weather. I feel like that would really ground the reader in time and space in this way. And I was like, write about the weather, like who does that, like what do you even say about the weather? And so I reread Richard Ford's Rock Springs and Marilyn Robinson's Housekeeping and just underlined all of the sentences about the weather, and then went and found a way, all of the moments that were sort of missing a little bit of color, and reinserting and learning how to do something like that. And so I think that little lessons like that I could maybe reapply to my songwriting, because they're just, finding impactful ways to color a scene, I think. And I think that might lend itself in the future.
And for you, because well, you mentioned that you haven't written anything since, so it's we can't really go further on that. But if you exploring kind of the themes that you have in your book, and you have done so on the first and second album, or at least that was the period that it's kind of about. Did it reignite certain thoughts, or had you already kind of gone through it all?
I think that, I wrote this, I wrote my first draft of this record and submitted it in like the summer of 2019. And then
Okay.
I did go and write and record the album in the wintertime of 2019. And then I came back to the book 5 months later to do revisions, and finally submitted it in the summer of 2020. But yeah, I mean, I think in a way, writing two albums about grief and writing this book about that experience as well, it sort of cleared a path for me to finally feel done with it. I feel like I've said everything I needed to say about this really traumatic period of time in my life, this really momentous like change in my life, losing this person, that I was able to sort of shift my focus and write about something new. And the new record is very much about a very different part of the human experience. It's about joy and sort of moving forward and embracing feeling in this way. So I think that in that sense, the book really helped me kind of unpack everything that I needed to about that experience and move on.
Right. And now, am I right in saying that one of the first things you kind of knew about the album is that you wanted to call it Jubilee, kind of just like you mentioned, you wanted to have that happy connotation?
Yeah, I did know for a long time that I wanted like this one word title that would like evoke a great feeling, and so I knew that. I think that for the first time I was thinking a lot about my discography and the albums and sort of context with one another, and I think that you can only really do that when you get to number three in a way. And so I was thinking about like color palette, both sonically and visually. Psychopomp is this like melancholy kind of light blue color, and then Soft Sounds is red and black. And so I felt like I wanted to make something very warm and brightly colored. So the album color even is these like lighter yellows and oranges, and I think even that sort of like extends to the sonic quality of the record. A lot of it is, it's very I don't know, it feels like very forward and very warm and lighthearted in a way, and more playful and ambitious. And that was sort of what I was going for with this record.
How did that kind of manifest itself as you were creating that sonic landscape? How did you, were you looking for certain kind of feelings or atmospheres?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the songs have a very sweet quality and a kind of like a jubilant quality, and they're the largest arrangements that I think that we've put out into the world. We used a lot of like brass and woodwind and string arrangements to kind of create a much larger environment.
And for you, was this in that sense then also an album of experimentation, or did you know quite well what you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always a huge element of experimentation in the album making process, but I did also do a lot more arrangement before I went into the studio and tried to do a lot of like kind of almost pre-production, and then I went into the studio kind of focusing more on tone. But not all of the songs were like that. Some of them were definitely really put together in the studio as well.
You say it was recorded in 2019. What was the span that it was written in? Was it that year?
I would say a majority of the songs were written like in the fall and winter of 2019. But there were some songs that I kind of had demos of or in my back pocket for a while, like Be Sweet was written in February of 2018. And then In Hell is a song that I've had for a long time, I think maybe even in the late 2017. So some of the songs, and then I think Posing in Bondage was also a demo that we had since 2018 at least. So some of the songs we like picked back up, but a majority of it was written in 2019 in the fall and winter.
Because I'm trying to kind of find the mind space that you were in as you were writing these songs. So because they are very different songs in terms of what you talk about and where you go with the song. So the bulk of it being written in 2019, what kind of year was that for you, both on a personal level and on a creative level?
Honestly, 2019 was an incredibly charmed year for me. I was playing like some of the biggest shows of our lives, and our band had grown so much larger than I could have ever anticipated, and we were traveling a lot, and yeah, just we were it just felt like we had made it in a way, and I had been working on this book, and it was a very isolating and new and frustrating lonely process. So by the time I submitted my first draft, I was just so excited to kind of like fall back into the bed of something I was very familiar with, and get to work with my longtime collaborator Craig Hendricks, and also invite other musicians that I loved into the project to sort of see what happened. I felt a lot more, I felt like I was returning to a medium that I felt most comfortable in. So I was very in a joyful place when making this record. But I also felt like, I had a lot to prove. Like it had been a couple of years since our last record came out. And so I really wanted to just make something big and bombastic.
And like you said, you felt like you've made it. So along with that, did that produce some pressure? Did that create some pressure?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but I feel like I will always put pressure on myself. I feel like when you stop putting pressure on yourself, maybe I have this real fear that you've stopped wanting to grow. And I never wanted to rest on any laurels. If the band gets bigger, that just means I have to push harder to reach like a new height. There's this new expectation, and there's new financial means, and there's new players. And, I never wanted to get lazy with it, because I recognize like how much of a lottery it is to win the ticket of getting to make music for a living, and I have plenty of friends that I consider far more talented than me that don't have this opportunity. So I want to really prove to myself and feel in my heart that I deserve to be here, and I've done everything I can to make the best art that I can to give to people.
This is maybe a somewhat unfair question about your own music then, but why do you think that people have that your music has resonated with so many people?
I have no idea, I mean, I think that we don't, some of my friends who I wish had seen more success, I guess, part of it is because as a musician, their music is more interesting to me because it's somewhat maybe a little bit more difficult, and I think at its root, the music that I make is rooted in pop. It's like I like to make music that just sounds good and is palatable and has, I guess, some, I don't think I try to make difficult music purposefully. I think that I am interested in working within structures and touching people emotionally in a very maybe simple way, and somehow. And I think that part of that has resonated with people, a larger audience. And yeah, I mean, I would like to believe that I've just been very vulnerable and honest, and that's something that also tends to hit people in a personal way. But beyond that, I really don't know. I've just tried my best and created work that's interested in me, and I've gotten really lucky that it's hit some people.
Right, and I agree. I do think that your songs are very relatable to people. It's a very, very, I don't know if this sounds bad, but an ordinary response to these difficulties we find in life. It's very human in a way.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned, for instance, feeling that isolation as you were writing the book, and is this then where a song like "Posing in Bondage" comes from? That the kind of wanting to reach out to people.
I think for that song, I feel like I'm a very, I'm an only child and a creative person. And so I'm very sensitive and, emotionally needy. And so I think that I just like to imagine scenes in which those feelings are more interesting.
Right.
So I think that I love the image of this woman who's so desperate for attention that she's waiting and done up in bondage for someone who never comes home, and what a like sad and striking image that is, and sort of comes to like represent a more basic feeling of just wishing that someone paid you more attention, I guess. And so that's where that came from.
Okay. Then there's Kokomo, Indiana. I wondered why Kokomo, because I tried to find a connection, but I couldn't really find it. And I don't really read other interviews because I don't want to be influenced too much.
Yeah, that's great. Kokomo, Indiana. That song, I was taking a lot of, I was taking guitar lessons again the year before I wrote this record. And as many guitar teachers will do, they'll make you learn a lot of Beatles songs. Mm-hmm. And so I was playing a lot of Beatles songs, and I was learning about, minor fourth chords, and like, playing a lot of major sevens, and, just, I wrote this song that incorporated a lot of these sort of like classic Beatles-y type of elements to it. And so it kind of came out to be like, a very sweet, simple song about like kind of teenage love and longing that a lot of, the earlier Beatles stuff is about. And so I kind of came up with this narrative of this like young boy who lives in a small town, who's saying goodbye to his like high school sweetheart as she goes off to like a foreign exchange program in Australia. But it was sort of seen through this like mature lens of like, wouldn't it be nice of, instead of being like so over dramatic and heartbroken about this experience, is that you have this like really sweet way to look at it of just like, we're young, and, you are so incredible, and you have so much to give to the world. And this is how, these are the things that I fell in love with, and it would be selfish to keep them for myself in this small town, and you have to go and show off to the world, those parts of yourself, and you have so much to learn and so much to do. And so I just love that sentiment. I wanted to write this very sweet song. And my drummer and the co-producer of the album, Craig Hendricks, was like, oh, it's like someone like Evan, like as a teenager. And Evan was our project manager at the label, and the label was based in Bloomington, Indiana. Okay. And so I was like, oh yeah, it's just like Bloomington, Indiana. And so I texted our project manager. I was like, oh, I kind of wrote this like fan fiction of what I imagined your life as a teenager in Bloomington, Indiana was like. And he was like, I didn't grow up in Bloomington. I grew up in Kokomo, Indiana. And I was like, that's even more perfect. I didn't have a title for the song, so I called it Kokomo, Indiana. And I kind of like the, because there's also Kokomo, the song by the Beach Boys, and it, has a similar kind of like, classic sort of Beach Boys sort of song. And a lot of their songs are also about this kind of like teenage longing of, wouldn't it be nice if we were older? So yeah, that's why it's called Kokomo,
right.
Indiana.
And the way you describe it now, is it also very autobiographical in the sense that kind of that idea of opening yourself up to the world and kind of seeing the beauty in it and moving forward? Kind of.
I think like I'm in my 30s. I'm a married woman. I don't like experience the kind of, intense like teenage desire that I used to, that make really great songs that everyone wants to listen to. So I think like I wanted to channel my memories of my like adolescence and like what those feelings were like. But of course, at that age, like I would have never had the maturity to think that way. I would have just been very woe is me, melodramatic about it. And so I think that I was kind of looking at, a teenage experience of mine of like, saying goodbye to a relationship sort of ending too soon because of circumstance, and what I wish I had the maturity to think of it, because like, isn't it beautiful that you got to have this experience together? But of course it's not meant to be forever, and that's beautiful too, and so that was sort of where I was coming from with that song.
Okay. And you mentioned playing a lot of Beatles songs as you were trying to kind of pick up the guitar again. I've heard about authors kind of copying entire books by people they admire, and what have you discovered about music by delving into these songs by arguably one of the greater bands in the world that has ever been?
I've always been someone that's sort of like willfully ignorant of music theory. And I think that I just was always so worried about, it like impacting my like naive songwriting ability or whatever. And I think what I learned from that experience is that, it can only really add to your toolbox and palette, and with the Beatles, it's like, these are undeniably songwriters who had a great understanding of composition and chord changes and progression and theory, and they employed it in this like mathematical way of what makes it interesting to do all these types of chord changes, and they knew exactly how like a minor fourth would like pervert a feeling, and so learning that made me just really excited to add it into my music, because I'd never worked with that before. And so I learned a lot from that, and was really, I feel like it opened me up in a big way.
Right. Well, to round off then, because you mentioned kind of, the last couple of albums have been received quite well, and I've seen the new songs that have been released have been received quite well. What is it like for you personally, that anticipation of releasing an album? Is it an anxious period? What is it like?
Yeah, I mean, it was, and now it's like been so long, and we're in such strange times that that anxiety seems so kind of petty, because like I had so much lead up time to this album. I think I was just like, I'm just at the point where I'm just so excited for it to come out and be done with it and move on with my life. And like, also I think I was like really, really nervous about the book, because I've never released a book before, that it almost like made me much less nervous about this album, which is at this point has become sort of old hat, and the initial responses to the record have been really positive. And so I'd maybe like less afraid or less anxious than I normally would be, but maybe that will change closer to June when things start to pop up about it and I start stewing over reviews.
Well, that's probably just don't read them. I would recommend just in general what people write on social media and all that kind of stuff. But do you have any expectations then in terms of success, because because music has been received so well so far? How do you think about success in a way?
Like I come from a DIY background, and I have been playing in bands since I was 16 years old, and I have done the grind, and I was like sort of a late bloomer to the success in a way, but I was totally happy. I wasn't totally happy, but I slept on couches for a long time, and I like toured in a minivan, and I've toured in a 15-passenger van, and I've toured, I truly felt that if the band could ever get to a place where we could, play to like 250, 500 capacity venues in a 15-passenger van, and maybe the four of us could all share one hotel room at the Holiday Inn, that was great. You know what I mean? Like that was like the height of my ambition. And so to be where we are at now, it's just mind-blowing. I truly I just never, we might, like, the plan is for us to be on a tour bus for the first time this year. And I never, in my wildest teenage dreams, would have said to you with a straight face, like, someday I'm going to be on a tour bus. Even that was just like unrealistic. I'm totally happy in a van playing shows and whatever. And so if you told me that I would be playing in you know, probably like to 3,000 people in New York and on a tour bus, and that we would have, you know, a larger band and crew that we're going with, like, you know, I'm just along for the ride at this point. You know, it's all just like above and beyond my expectation, and it's great. And I'm just trying to work as hard as I can to like kind of keep up with it. So I really don't know what's in store. It's all like so surreal. I just want to focus on like what I can do to feel like I deserve to be there in a way. And so that's just where I'm at. I don't even know what's to come, but it seems bigger than anything I could imagine, and that's all right with me.
Well, yeah, that's the fun thing about the future. Nobody knows, and it's kind of exciting to see what will happen. So Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. And I hope
Thank
you
you.
have
This
a
was really
lovely day.
enjoyable, actually. Thank you so much,
Thank
Robin.
you.